What if a single moment on a mountain road erased a future that two people spent years building? And what if the story behind that moment is far deeper than the internet first believed? Recently, Amelia Hartford finally spoke publicly about the tragedy that changed her life. Her words revealed something shocking. The man who died in that fiery crash wasn't just a casual friend. He was her closest partner in a vision few people even knew existed. On December 21, 2025, a bright red Ferrari 296 GTS exited a tunnel along the infamous Angeles Crest Highway. Moments later, it slammed into a concrete barrier. Within seconds, the car was engulfed in flames. Behind the wheel was Vince Zampella, one of the most influential figures in video game history. He didn't survive. But what most people didn't realize at the time was this. The crash didn't just take a legendary game developer. It destroyed a secret business empire that was just beginning to take shape. So what exactly were these two building together? And how did everything vanish in an instant? Two lives defined by loss. To understand what truly ended that day, we need to look at the two people behind the story. Their lives had more in common than most people realize. Both experienced devastating loss. Both rebuilt their lives from nothing. And both were driven by the same obsession: machines, speed, and creation. But how do two people from completely different worlds end up on the same path? Was it coincidence? Or was it the kind of connection that only forms when two people understand struggle the same way? Amelia Hartford's turning point. Amelia Hartford was born in 1993 in California. At first glance, her childhood appeared ordinary. Sunny suburbs. School friends. A typical American upbringing. But everything changed in a single moment. At just 15 years old, she lost her father. She was the only one home when it happened. Imagine that for a moment. A teenager suddenly confronting a moment that most adults struggle to process. How do you recover from something like that? How do you rebuild when the world you knew disappears overnight? Her family eventually moved to Indiana so her mother could try to rebuild their lives. But for Amelia, the move felt like another loss. New town. New school. No familiar faces. Just grief and silence. And yet, in the middle of that darkness, something unexpected appeared. Cars. When Amelia got her driver's license, she stumbled into the local car scene. Late-night garage builds. Weekend races. Groups of mechanics and enthusiasts who spoke the language of engines and horsepower. For the first time since her father's death, she felt connected again. She later described these people as her found family. Her first car was an Infiniti G35. It wasn't a supercar. It wasn't even particularly fast. But it was hers. And it changed everything. There was just one problem. She barely knew how to drive manual. On the drive home, she burned out the clutch. For most people, that would have been embarrassing enough to quit. But Amelia reacted differently. Instead of giving up, she became obsessed. How did transmissions work? How could engines produce more power? What separated a fast car from a legendary one? The deeper she went into the automotive world, the more it transformed her life. Years later, Amelia wasn't just a car enthusiast. She had become one of the most recognized automotive creators on the internet. Her YouTube channel exploded in popularity, attracting millions of viewers fascinated by her custom builds, high-performance experiments, and fearless driving. She helped set quarter-mile records with a new Nissan Z. She built wild high-horsepower projects in her own garage. She competed in the legendary Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. She even stepped into Hollywood through projects connected to the film Gran Turismo. But behind the cameras and the internet fame, the truth remained simple. Cars had saved her life. They gave her direction. They gave her purpose. But she had no idea that her passion would eventually lead her to someone who understood reinvention even better than she did. The rise of Vince Zampella. The life of Vince Zampella started very differently. He wasn't born into fame or success. In fact, his early life looked almost ordinary. He was born in 1970 and eventually dropped out of community college. At one point, he worked as a handyman in Florida. Nothing about that early chapter suggested he would become one of the most powerful figures in the gaming industry. But sometimes all it takes is one opportunity. A friend helped him land a small job at a video game company doing customer support and testing. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't creative. But it gave him something more valuable. A doorway. From there, Zampella began learning everything he could about game development. Slowly, quietly, he climbed the ladder. Eventually, he helped co-found Infinity Ward. That studio would go on to create one of the most successful entertainment franchises in history. Call of Duty. The series has sold hundreds of millions of copies worldwide. It transformed online multiplayer gaming. And it made Zampella one of the most powerful creative leaders in the industry. But success rarely comes without conflict. After the massive success of Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, Zampella was suddenly fired. Millions of dollars in bonuses were withheld. A brutal legal battle followed. For a moment, it seemed like everything he built had collapsed. What do you do when the empire you helped create suddenly turns against you? Most people would walk away. Zampella didn't. Instead, he started over. He co-founded Respawn Entertainment. And once again, lightning struck. The studio produced hit titles like Titanfall, Apex Legends, and Star Wars Jedi: Fallen Order. Eventually, the studio was acquired by Electronic Arts. Zampella rose to become one of the most powerful executives in gaming. But even with billion-dollar franchises under his control, he never lost one of his earliest passions. Cars. Fast ones. Rare ones. Machines built for performance. And that passion would eventually lead him to Amelia. A partnership nobody knew about. When Amelia Hartford and Vince Zampella first met, their world seemed completely different. One was a YouTube automotive creator. The other ran massive video game studios. But the moment they started talking, they discovered something unusual. They thought the same way. Both believed in building things from nothing. Both loved engineering. Both chased performance and innovation. And both had experienced the pain of losing everything before rebuilding it. Slowly, that connection turned into something bigger. A friendship. Then a collaboration. Eventually, a business partnership. Together they began quietly planning something ambitious. An exotic car dealership. A production company. A creative studio that would merge automotive culture with gaming and digital media. Imagine that combination. A gaming titan with massive industry resources. An internet creator who understood modern audiences better than most traditional companies. What kind of empire could they have built together? Could they have created a new kind of entertainment brand, one where video games, car culture, and real-world performance collided? The idea had enormous potential. But very few people knew about it. It was still forming. Still fragile. Still secret. And then the crash happened. The road that took everything. The location of the accident matters. Angeles Crest Highway is famous among driving enthusiasts. Stretching through the San Gabriel Mountains, it offers breathtaking views and technical curves that attract drivers from all over California. For many, it's a dream road. But it also carries a darker reputation. Emergency responders know it well. The road has seen countless crashes over the years. Why? Because beauty and danger live side by side there. Tight corners. Blind turns. Steep drops. One mistake can change everything. And on December 21st, 2025, something went terribly wrong. Was it speed? Mechanical failure? A split-second misjudgment? No one outside the investigation knows the exact answer. But the result was devastating. The Ferrari 296 GTS struck the barrier. Flames erupted. And the future two people had quietly spent years building disappeared in moments. When the news first broke, it spread across the internet with the speed of a wildfire. Headlines appeared within minutes. Social media feeds filled with shocked reactions. News alerts flashed on millions of phones around the world. Most people focused on one thing. The tragedy. The crash. The sudden loss of a famous industry leader whose work had influenced an entire generation of gamers. For the public, the story seemed painfully simple. A brilliant career. A powerful car. A devastating accident. But for those who understood the deeper story, those who had followed the lives, ambitions, and partnership forming behind the scenes, something else had disappeared that day. Not just a life. A vision. A partnership. A dream that might have reshaped two industries at once. Because behind the headlines about the crash was a future that had quietly been taking shape, one that almost no one outside a small circle fully understood. And perhaps the most haunting question remains this. What would that future have looked like if the car had made it safely through that tunnel? Would the world today be talking about a revolutionary company instead of a heartbreaking accident? Or was that moment on the mountain road always destined to change everything? Some stories end quietly. Others end in fire. And sometimes, the biggest ideas disappear before the world ever knows they existed. The road that day. On December 21st, 2025, the sky above Angeles Crest Highway was clear. The road, famous among driving enthusiasts, curves along the mountains north of Los Angeles. For decades it had attracted motorcyclists, sports car owners, and anyone who loved the feeling of speed combined with breathtaking views. It was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. Sharp bends, narrow shoulders, long stretches where one mistake could send a vehicle off the road. Around 12:45 p.m., Vince Zampella was driving along that road. His car was a Ferrari 296 GTS, a hybrid supercar that represented the cutting edge of automotive engineering. The vehicle produces more than 800 horsepower. It can accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 3 seconds. For most drivers, controlling that kind of power requires absolute focus. But Zampella was no stranger to high-performance machines. He loved cars. Friends often described him as someone who appreciated both speed and craftsmanship. For him, driving wasn't just transportation. It was passion. But what happened next would change everything. Moments after exiting a tunnel, the Ferrari suddenly veered off the road. There was no long skid across the pavement. No dramatic attempt to correct course that witnesses later described. The vehicle simply left the road and struck a barrier. The impact triggered something far worse. A fire ignited almost instantly. The Ferrari's advanced hybrid system, combined with fuel and damaged components, turned the wreck into a rapidly spreading blaze. Emergency responders were alerted automatically by an Apple device that detected the crash and transmitted the location. Within minutes, help was on the way. But time moves differently during emergencies. Every second becomes critical. By the time responders arrived, the Ferrari was already engulfed in flames. Zampella was trapped inside. He died at the scene. A passenger who had been ejected from the vehicle was rushed to a nearby hospital but later died from severe injuries. Authorities never publicly confirmed the passenger's identity. And just like that, a future disappeared. The unanswered question. In the hours following the crash, investigators began examining the scene. The California Highway Patrol released a brief statement. The vehicle had veered off the road for unknown reasons. That phrase, unknown reasons, quickly became the center of endless speculation online. People began asking questions. Was the car traveling at high speed? Did a mechanical failure occur? Did the driver attempt a sudden maneuver? Were weather conditions a factor? Or could something else have happened entirely? No one outside the investigation had clear answers. And even after weeks passed, authorities never publicly announced a definitive cause. For many observers, that uncertainty made the tragedy even more haunting. Because when a story ends without clear answers, the mind begins filling in the gaps. Was it preventable? Could something different have happened seconds earlier? Would one small change have saved 2 lives? Sometimes the most difficult part of a tragedy isn't what we know. It's what we never will. Shock across the gaming world. Within hours of the announcement, tributes began appearing across the gaming industry. Developers, studio heads, content creators, and fans posted messages remembering Zampella's impact. Electronic Arts released a statement describing him as a visionary whose work helped define modern gaming. Former colleagues shared stories about his leadership. Players recalled the games that had shaped their childhoods. Even Infinity Ward, the company that had once fired him during one of the industry's most dramatic corporate conflicts, publicly mourned his passing. It was a moment that reminded everyone just how influential he had been. Gaming studios around the world paused to reflect. How many careers had started because someone played one of his games? How many ideas had been inspired by the worlds he helped create? And perhaps most importantly, what was he planning to build next? One message captured the mood of the moment. Industry host Jeff Keithley wrote that Zampella always believed his greatest project was still ahead of him. At the time, the quote seemed inspiring. Looking back now, it feels haunting. Because his next creation might not have been a video game at all. A partnership few understood. Behind the scenes, Zampella had been building something new. Not alone. With Amelia Hartford. For many fans, Hartford was already a well-known figure in the automotive world. Her enthusiasm for cars, her growing online presence, and her ability to connect with audiences had made her one of the most recognizable personalities in automotive media. But what people didn't fully realize was how ambitious her plans were becoming. She wasn't just reviewing cars anymore. She was building companies, launching media platforms, creating opportunities for creators who loved cars as much as she did. And somewhere along that journey, her path crossed with Zampella's. Their collaboration wasn't just casual. They were working on multiple ventures together. A dealership, a creative studio, a production company focused on automotive storytelling. Projects that combined technology, entertainment, and car culture in ways that hadn't really existed before. Friends who knew them said they complemented each other perfectly. Zampella brought decades of leadership and strategic thinking. Hartford brought energy, creativity, and a direct connection with audiences. Together, they weren't just building businesses. They were building momentum. Which raises an intriguing question. If their plans had succeeded, could they have created something entirely new, a hybrid between the gaming world and the automotive world? A media empire built around passion, storytelling, and technology? No one will ever know. Amelia's emotional tribute. 2 days after the crash, Amelia Hartford posted a video online. It lasted only 28 seconds. But it felt longer. The clip showed brief moments from their time together. Laughing at car events. Walking through garages filled with exotic machines. Moments of genuine friendship. There was no dramatic music. No long speech. Just memories. The caption beneath the video was painfully simple. A family lost their father. An industry lost a legend. I lost my best friend. Then she added 5 words that resonated with millions of people. I'm not okay. The message spread rapidly. People shared it not just because of the tragedy, but because of the honesty. In public life, grief is often polished. Statements are carefully written. Emotions are filtered. But this was raw, real, unfiltered. And that vulnerability connected with people everywhere. Because grief doesn't follow a script. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who admit they're struggling. The future that disappeared. As more information surfaced about the partnership between Hartford and Zampella, many fans realized something bigger had been lost. Their plans weren't small experiments. They were long-term visions. The dealership they were building was meant to become a gathering place for automotive culture. The production company aimed to create high-end storytelling about cars, technology, and innovation. And at the same time, Hartford had launched another ambitious project. A streaming platform called Driven, focused on automotive creators. The platform was scheduled to launch its beta in 2026. The goal was simple but bold. Give automotive creators a space where they could share content, build audiences, and collaborate without the limitations of traditional platforms. In many ways, it mirrored the early days of gaming media. Community-driven, passion-fueled, creator-focused. The platform is still moving forward. But the larger vision she and Zampella shared now has a permanent gap. And that raises a difficult question. How do you continue building something when the person who believed in it most is gone? Do you keep going for them? Or does part of the dream disappear with them? What we know, and what we don't. Despite all the speculation, the confirmed facts remain simple. Vince Zampella, age 55, died on December 21, 2025. The crash occurred on Angeles Crest Highway. He was driving a Ferrari 296 GTS. The vehicle struck a barrier and caught fire. A second passenger also died. Authorities have not publicly confirmed the cause of the crash. Those are the facts. Everything else remains speculation. And perhaps it always will. The deeper meaning. But maybe the real story isn't just about a crash. Maybe it's about the fragile nature of the futures we build. Both Amelia Hartford and Vince Zampella understood what it meant to lose everything and start again. Zampella had experienced major career upheavals earlier in his life. Hartford had built her platform from scratch in an industry where very few creators succeed. They both believed in rebuilding, reinventing, starting new chapters. And together, they were beginning another one. A chapter filled with possibility. New businesses. New stories. New ideas. Then suddenly, it was gone. A future that took years to imagine disappeared in seconds. How many dreams exist like that? Ideas waiting to be built. Projects sitting in notebooks. Partnerships just beginning to take shape. How many of them vanish before the world ever sees them? The question that remains. The Ferrari left the road for reasons that may never be fully explained. But what we do know is this. Inside that car was more than a driver. It carried the hopes of two people who believed the next chapter of their lives was just beginning. And sometimes, life reminds us how quickly everything can change. So let me ask you something. If tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, what unfinished dream would you start today? What idea have you been waiting to pursue? What conversation have you been putting off? What future are you assuming will still be there later? Because stories like this remind us of one truth we often forget. Time is the one thing none of us get back.